To get started with this material, I'm just going to hit Shift A and get a mesh here and grab an icosphere. Then I'm going to go back to solid mode just so that we can see everything. I'm going to change the subdivisions to 5 and then right click and shade smooth. Then I've just got my camera here pointed right at my key or sphere or whatever. And then if we go over to the shading tab, I just have my 3D viewport set up with my node editor. Then if we go to the rendered preview, I'm using cycles. You can also use Eevee, but at the end we are going to be using some displacement. So cycles might be good, but this still looks good in Eevee, so don't worry. So then with the lighting, I'm just unchecking scene world and using this 3D lighting so we get some nice view. Then I'm going to press new. I'm just going to type in turf. Then I'm going to zoom out here and find my nodes. There they are. Then before we get started, make sure you go to edit preferences and enable the node wrangler add-on, just so you have all the shortcuts and everything. So just search up add-ons and check the node wrangler add-on box. Then we can press Shift A, search for a Voronoi texture here. Then with this selected, I'll press Control and T. And then if we Control Shift left click this Voronoi texture, we can preview what is happening with it. Then we're simply going to take our object coordinates into the mapping. And then after this Voronoi texture, I'm going to press Shift A and search for a map range node, just like this. Place it after the distance, and this distance goes into the value. Then on this map range, I'm going to take this from minimum value up to a 0.3. And then I'm going to drag the from maximum value down to a 0.35, just like this. And this is going to be creating our mask for the little blades of turf. So then I'm going to switch this scale up quite a bit to a 100. Oops, I didn't select it. There we go. And that's going to make everything super small and fine. So then I'm going to go ahead and select the Voronoi and the map range and press Control Shift D. That's just going to duplicate them while keeping the vector plugged in. Then I'm going to switch this one's scale to a 125, just like this. Now if we preview them, this one's smaller and fits in between the other one. Sweet. So next I'm going to hit Shift A and search for an invert node because we're going to plug this into bump. And in the bump map, how it reads it is white is equal to height, and currently we have black as all the blades. And so this is going to just convert it to the opposite. And then we're going to do that for the bottom one as well. So Shift D. And then plug this in here. So we can Control Shift left click and preview them. Nice. Then we're going to mix these together. And so I'll hit Shift A and search for a mix RGB. And I'm just going to switch this blending mode here to add, plug them into color 1 and color 2, and then switch the factor to a 1. And then check clamp so we have all values between 0 and 1, so we don't get anything over white or under black. So now that we have this, we have our mask for the blades of grass, or turf technically. So then if you notice, there are still a lot of black spaces in between these, so we need to get a little bit finer. So I'm just going to take these bottom Voronoi map range and invert, Control Shift D, duplicate them one more time. Then I'm going to switch the scale on this one to a 150. Then I'm going to duplicate this mix node right here, so select it and Shift D. Take the color from the previous into color 1, and the invert color from this into color 2. Then Control Shift left click to preview, and now it's looking a lot thicker like we want it to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this and grab it and move it back a little bit to give us some more space. If we hold Shift and right click, we can drag over these 3 nodes, node lines or pathways, whatever you call them, and then we get this extra guy which we can grab and move to make everything more organized. So then now we're just going to plug this into our bump. So I'll press Shift A and search for a bump node here, like so. I'm going to take the color and plug it into the height, and then this normal into the normal of our principled shader. Sweet. So now we're going to be putting in the little things that always get in your shoe, the little tiny black pebbles that are super annoying every time you run in turf or basically just walk. And so yeah, we're going to be putting those in between where all these blades of the green are. So I'm going to hit Shift A, just search for a Voronoi texture here, like so. Actually, if you want, and then we'll duplicate this map range and invert node because we're using the same sort of thing. Now I'll just take this distance from the Voronoi into our value. Then I'm going to take this vector here into here, like this. Then I'll Control Shift left click to preview. Currently we're on a way too small scale, so I'm going to make this up all the way to a 300 because these are super fine and they're way smaller than the actual blades of grass, so I made them twice as small. Technically they're even a little bit smaller, so we could even up this even more if you want to. But yeah, that's just what I'm going to be doing for now. Anyways, now we're going to factor this into some separate bump. So I'm going to press Shift A and I'm going to search for a mix RGB here actually, like this. Then we're going to hit Shift A. I'm going to search for a math node, which for a greater than node, basically. So we make this mask perfect because there are little gray spots in between. So I'm going to switch this function here to greater than, not sign, and switch the threshold to a 0.01 like this. And then just take our add node here, plug it into the greater than, then plug this into our factor. Then I'm going to take this guy into color 1 because we want it to be where the black is. And then color 2, we're going to make a pure black. So if we Control Shift and left click, we can see that we now have basically, it's sort of basically the same thing, but it's not occurring anywhere where there's already white. So this is what we had before right here. And this is what we have now, a lot less. Anyways, now that we've done that, we're going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to search for a bump node. I'm going to put that in between these two, then take this color into our height and switch the strength on this guy to like a 0.05, just like this. So then if we preview, we can see that there's a little bit of bump happening in between. And if you control and right click, you can cut the previous bump node off and you can see what this one's doing. If you think it's a little weak, you can bring it up to like a 0.1 so you can see it a little bit more. But yeah, anyways, I'll plug this normal back in. And so now we have our little black pebbles. So now we can factor in our color. And to do that, we're going to be using some noise textures. So I'm going to go ahead and take all these guys. I'm going to grab them and move them down a little bit just so they stay out of the way. And then Shift A, search for a noise texture here. We're going to be using a few levels of detail on this. So we're going to be doing very similar something to this, but just with noise textures. Then we're going to take this vector into the noise texture. Then I'll Shift right click just so we have this guy to play with. Then I'll Control Shift left click this noise texture here. And I'm going to switch the scale up to a 50 and the detail to a 10. Then I'm going to hit Shift A and search for a map range node. Place that right after. Take this from minimum value, bring it up to a 0.3 to up the contrast of the black, and then bring the from maximum down to a 0.7 to bring the whites in. Then, now that we've done that, we have our first level of detail. I'm going to select both of these guys and press Control Shift D, move him up here. Then I'll press Control Shift D one more time and move him to the bottom. So on this top scale, I'm just going to change this one to a 75. And on this bottom one, I'm going to change it down to a 25. Sweet, so now let's mix them together. Shift A, search for a mix RGB node. And then we're going to take this color into color 1 and this into color 2. So then for the factor on this mix node, we're going to be using another noise texture. So I'm going to press Shift A and search up. Actually, let's just duplicate these two. Control Shift D, move it up here. I'm going to switch the scale to a 5 on this one. So I'll Control Shift left click to preview. And the reason I do that is so that we can see what's going on. Yeah, I'm going to switch this to a 0.4 and this to a 0.6. So this is determining where we want to be splitting up everything. This is going to be our factor for the mix. So now we have the different levels and they're sort of blurring together kind of nicely. So next, I'm going to duplicate this mix node. So select it and press Shift D. Take the color and move it into color 1 and this color into color 2. Then for the factor on this, I'm going to plug this into here. But if we do that, then we can see that it's sort of kind of wonky looking because we're taking half of this and it's taking up way too much space. It only needs to be taking up a third. So I'm going to press Shift A and I'm going to search for a math node and place that in between the two. I'm going to switch the mode to subtract and subtract 0.333 or 1/3. So now it blurs a little bit better. If you think you should subtract more, you can always obviously up this. And the more you do, it will blur better. But I like the 0.333 look because it is a third. So then now that we have our mask, we just have to plug this guy into our colors. So we'll hit Shift A, search for our mix RGB, plug this into the factor like this, take color 1, and I'll give you a hex value for this green. It's a 456423. Again, that is a 456423, just like that. Then this color 2 is going to be a 285429. Again, that is a 285429, just like that. Now I'll Control Shift and left click this guy to preview him, and we have this, and it's looking really good. But we still have to factor in our little black granules thing, otherwise they won't show up at all. So we need one more mix node. So Shift A, let's search for a mix node here. Then we can take this color into the color 1. Then for the factor on this guy, we're going to be using our greater than node. And actually we need to be taking this color into color 2. So if we preview this guy, we can see that we have our green. And if we put him up here, it's like this, etc. So then for the black, we need to basically, we can just make this a pure black, or we can make it like slightly less black, like a 0.003, and then bring up the saturation slightly. And I'm gonna bring the hue to like a 0.6 something to make it a blue like that. So cool. Now we have the color, we have the black in between. And I'm just gonna go ahead and copy this hex value real quick to show you what it looks like if you put this into color 1 instead. If we put this into color 1 and this into here, then it looks like this. So you may want it to be, where's our actual mask? So currently the white on this guy is where the grass is, and the black is where the granules are. And so when we go into here, if we cut this guy out, if we switch this to a white, we can see that it's the same mask as this. And so this means this goes into the white, so we get all the colors where they're supposed to be. Yeah. Anyways, if you think there's too much black, you can always come over here and you can up the scales on some of these Voronoi textures, or you can obviously up the scale on this guy to make them smaller. But yeah, you can always add levels of detail to the Voronoi textures just by Control-Shift-D, add an extra mix node, and then you're good. You know how to do that because we did it 3 times. But now that we have that, we can just take our color and plug it into the base color here. And we have our turf. So now something cool that we can do, because we're at the end, is we can factor in some displacement. So if we press N on our keyboard, it'll open up this side panel if you don't already. You can go to Options, Displacement, and you can change that to Displacement and Bump. And then we can press Shift-A, search for a displacement node. And we can leave the roughness on 0.5. You can obviously up that if you want to, or you can lower it if you want it to be reflective, but turf isn't reflective, so 0.5 or a 0.6, something like that is good for your roughness. Anyways, back to displacement. For the factor on this, we can take in this original add node. So plug that into our height of the displacement, then take our displacement and plug it into the material output displacement. And it's going to do some wonky things real quick. I'm going to switch this scale down to a 0.1 and the mid-level to a 1 real quick, just so that it doesn't. I'll switch the mid-level back to a 0.5. So then I'll Control-Shift left-click our principled shader, and currently it looks terrible, but that's because we don't have enough geometry. So we can go over to Modifiers, Add Modifiers, and then go to a Subdivision Surface Modifier, and then check Adaptive Subdivision. You won't have this Adaptive Subdivision setting if you are in Eevee, and if in Cycles, you'll only have it if you're using the Experimental. But yeah, if you want the Adaptive Subdivision, you can do that, or you can just subdivide your mess a lot manually. So now if we go back to Render Preview, we will see that it's looking like this right now. And it's sort of, I'm exaggerating everything. I'm going to go ahead and add a plane so we can see it on there. So I'll go ahead and hide this guy, hit Shift-A, Mesh, let's add a plane. I'll scale it up a little bit. Cool. I'll Control-A, Rotation Scale. I'm going to go ahead and hit Tab, then I'll right-click. I'm going to subdivide everything. I'll subdivide it 10 times, and then I'll go ahead and give it its own Subdivision Surface Modifier like this. I'm going to check the Simple button and check Adaptive Subdivision. Then I'll just go to my materials, search up my turf, like so, and add it in. So currently, we are in the viewport, so it's not dicing it super high quality, but it is adding our displacement in. It's a little bit too much though, so I'm going to go back over to our Shading tab and switch the scale. It's already at a 0.1, let's switch it to like a 0.05, something like that. So it's a little bit less. But if we go ahead and render this guy out, which I'll do for you real quick, I went ahead and rendered that out, and this is what it's looking like in the viewport after the render. So as you can see, there's a lot of black granules in here, so you can always lower that amount if you want to very easily. But I wanted it to look like it's been run over a lot, sort of a thing, so that's why there's that many. But anyway, this is the finished turf material. I'll go ahead and back into the viewport like this. Obviously, it's looking like this right now because the dicing scale is up to an 8 in the viewport, as you can see here. So it's not dicing everything up properly. But obviously, you can take off the displacement entirely. So Control right click to destroy that. I'll go ahead and back over to layout. And as you can see here, I'll zoom in for you. It is looking a bit cartoonish, but it is still looking really good. Obviously, like I said, there are a lot of those black granules. And I'll show you what it looks like in Eevee real quick. Let me hop over to the Eevee engine, let this load up. And as well as looking like an Eevee. Not as good as the Cycles, obviously. So I'll go ahead and show you how to decrease the amount of black granules you have before I go, because I've mentioned that several times, so I figured might as well. So to do that, I'm just going to grab these guys, move them down here, and then you can either up the scale on these guys if you want, or you can simply add an extra level of them. So I'm going to do that part. I'll just take these guys, Control Shift D, move them down here, change this to a, let's say a 200. Then I'm going to hit duplicate this mix node, Shift D, down here. I'm going to hit Shift and right click on all these guys so that they're all coming from the same thing. I'll put this in between, and then just take this color into color 2. Like this. Then if we Control Shift left click on this guy, I'm in Eevee now, so I'm lagging a little bit. I'm going to switch back to cycles real quick, just so that my CPU isn't taking everything. Get me back to cycles. Nice. And as we can see, if we preview the shader again, I'm a bit zoomed out, so it's kind of hard to see the difference. But let me come back up here. We can see now that there are a lot less black spots and black grain in between everything. But obviously this placement's gone because we turned that off. But yeah, that's how you can use this cool turf material, and hopefully you can get it to look super nice in some of your renders or some of your game engines. It doesn't have to be super diced up if you're in your game engine. But yeah, anyways, I'll see y'all guys in the next one.